Good afternoon. Illinois Extension's happy to host another Illinois Office of Broadband presentation for you today as part of the larger Illinois Broadband Lab series. I am Nancy Wodralgo, State Specialist in Community and Economic Development. We are happy to welcome Matt Schmit, Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, as well as Amber Broughton, who is from the State of Illinois Grants Accountability Office. So Matt and Amber, we are very happy to have you on. We're looking forward, Matt, to this presentation on the application requirements for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant and these Illinois Broadband Office of Broadband grant application requirements in general. Is really great to have an overview of this information. I want to remind our participants and potential applicants that they're invited to ask questions anytime in the chat space. We are all just very much looking forward to the presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you now, Matt. Thank you.
All right. Thanks once again, Nancy, for you and your colleagues at University of Illinois Extension for making this so easy for us. Folks, if you've been following the activity of the Illinois Office of Broadband and our Broadband Lab this summer, this is, I think, the fourth webinar we've had, the third in a row. For your viewing enjoyment, we're moving these to Thursdays and not Fridays this summer. So we recognize Fridays in the summer are absolutely sacred. But that being said, today's session kicks off a very intentional two-track webinar series that we are offering for stakeholders to help position folks around the state to take part in our programming. And we're really excited because, well, the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program has been around for a couple of years now and has been our main draw in terms of applications and dollars moved. We are able to, I guess, diversify our offerings in more directions with the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program that will be starting in 2024 and our Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter Grant Program that is taking applications right now. And so we wanted to take a moment this summer to engage stakeholders new to the Office of Broadband in our programming and those who've been with us for a while, just to level set on a couple of different tracks for discussion. And so with that, we'll talk a little bit about what this summer webinar series is all about. So track A, which kicks off today, is really focused on offering guidance for grant applicants and understanding the grant management after a grant is issued. A lot goes into applying for a grant and a lot goes into maintaining and staying in good stead with a grant that's received. And so we want to make sure that we are being as crystal clear as we possibly can in terms of what potential applicants can be doing from day one before an application is submitted, and then making sure that as an applicant becomes a grantee with the Office of Broadband and the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, we're all in lockstep in terms of expectations and meeting requirements. And so today's focus is going to be on the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, as we refer to it generally, and then also talking about, from a higher level, the various grant application requirements and guidance that we can offer. Next week at the same time, we'll be doing a deeper dive on procurement and how it relates to the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. There may be some overlap in content covered today on July 13th and next week on July 20th, but that's intentional. With our new offerings, the Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter and other new programs coming on board here in the summer and fall, we're really looking forward to working with new stakeholders who might not be as familiar with the Office of Broadband or the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So we feel it's a really good time to kind of go to the basics, grant application, grant making 101. And that's what track A is really all about. Level setting on expectations if you want to become a grantee of the Office of Broadband. August 3rd, we're going to talk a little bit about prevailing wage in the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Program. Very important requirements, particularly of our capital grant program, the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. Even stakeholders who've been with us from day one as grantees or as subcontractors can benefit from that August 3rd discussion. We're planning to have officials from the Department of Labor, as well as the Comptroller's Office and the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, talking about those requirements and how to get it right from the start. And then on August 17th, we'll be wrapping up track A, talking about the Business Enterprise Program, environmental review, and some other requirements of a grant in Illinois. And so really important, track A, focusing on the basics of becoming an applicant, becoming a grantee, staying in good standing with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and our sister agencies. We want to work with you early and often as the Office of Broadband in Illinois enters a very exciting chapter of our work focused on digital equity and also doubling down on our investment in capital in the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. So folks, Track A is really important. Track B, equally important, but just different. It's focused on the community role in broadband development and digital equity. And so we're going to be offering 4 similar webinars scattered throughout the course of the next 2 months. This track begins on July 27th, talking about, again, the community role in broadband development. We've always emphasized the important role that community leaders and everyday Illinoisans can play in getting broadband and digital equity right. And so we want to be intentional about talking about success stories from the past few years and how a community just getting into the game right now can really get it right again from the start and be effective in helping us guide dollars, forging partnerships, and helping to eliminate the digital divide here in Illinois. August 10th, we'll be talking about broadband technologies, a lot of great information, development, and innovation that's out there. We want to be able to provide some of that information for you. August 24th, we'll talk about broadband funding, partnerships, and project development. It's great to talk about technology. It's great to recognize needs in the community, but our office in this program is all about getting things done. And so that session on August 24th is going to be how you put the package together. And then finally, on August 31, talking about adoption, affordability, and digital inclusion. For 3 years now, almost 4, we've been talking about that 3-legged stool of access, adoption, and utilization. We're very intentional about taking a holistic approach to broadband and digital equity. And so Track B, you're going to see that treatment from the get-go. And so hopefully you're going to find value in all of the webinars offered every week between now and essentially Labor Day. But if you'd like to choose Track A or Track B, obviously follow your interests. And as Nancy had mentioned, all of this great content is going to be curated at the University of Illinois Extension website, and it's linked from our Office of Broadband website. Whew, all right, so that's level setting. This is what we've got in front of us this summer. Again, just a note, Thursday afternoons at noon, not Fridays. We're going to give you all that Friday off. And so jumping ahead, folks, I can't resist. Here's our Office of Broadband Connect Illinois website. On that vertical menu to the left, all the information that you're really going to need about what our Office of Broadband is doing. If there's activity taking place at the Broadband Lab, our collaboration with the University of Illinois system, we will link to it directly off of this webpage. And so this is a great resource for you to learn about our Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, our Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter Grant Program, and a lot of the new opportunities that will be coming your way in the months ahead. And so as you scroll down on this menu, you're going to see a couple of things. One, under Digital Equity Grants, the Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter tab. It'll take you directly to the Notice of Funding Opportunity. We covered this all last week in our Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter webinar. And so if you want to have in-depth treatment of that grant opportunity, check out that webinar. If you scroll down further on this vertical menu, you'll see under Broadband Grants, the Round 3 NOFO for the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, and a lot of information regarding how to become an applicant and submit your application. So as we're talking about NOFOs and applying for Office of Broadband grants, that's where you can find more information. And of course, there's past webinars, again, curated on the University of Illinois Extension website. And so without further ado, we'll get into the NOFO here for the Kickstarter. You scroll down, you're going to see a lot of requirements. The NOFO supplement, which will bring to life what the Notice of Funding is all about. In this case, we're talking about the Kickstarter program. The same holds true for our Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. You'll see a couple of uniform grant applications, including for a budget and for narrative, a program application specific, in this case, to the Capacity Kickstarter program, and then mandatory disclosures, conflict of interest forms. And so all this is really important. And we just want to emphasize it's not simply about reading the NOFO and submitting your narrative in a draft budget. You got to put some time into the front end and preparing a compelling application. And we lay out the links and the information that we're looking for right on our website. But once you get into the NOFO itself, and if you click on the NOFO, this is the screen you'll see, and you scroll down, you're actually going to see, in this case, the Digital Equity Capacity Kickstarter NOFO. We lay out the program description, just as we would with the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, what we're looking for, what the program seeks to achieve, a list of eligible applicants, and in other, I think, key aspects of the funding opportunity. You scroll down more and you're going to get to a section about eligibility. And this is critically important for an applicant that would like to become a grantee. You know, we've seen some really compelling ideas shared with us in the past, but if you don't have these boxes checked prior to submission, you may be ineligible for funding. The good news is, what we try to do at the Office of Broadband is move away from high stakes deadlines and give potential applicants a number of opportunities to collaborate with us for grant funding. And so that's the plus side. But there are requirements that need to be met as an applicant, and then once you become a grantee. And of course, as I had mentioned, that's what today's webinar in track A of this webinar series is all about. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic over to my esteemed colleague, Amber Broughton at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Amber, you have been absolutely terrific in collaborating with me to set up this webinar. And so the mic is yours. Take it away.
All right, great, thank you. So like Matt said, my name is Amber Broughton, and I am with DCEO in the Office of Accountability. So in this presentation, we will be discussing GATA and the GATA grantee portal. We're going to talk about pre-qualification and some other requirements. And like Matt said, we're going to kind of continue this conversation next week, get a little more into detail. This is just to kind of start off, if you are new to GATA and the GATA grantee portal, or maybe you haven't used it in a while, this might be a good refresher for you. But yeah, we'll be kind of just introducing what those requirements are. Next slide. All right, so we'll be reviewing the kind of overall DCEO grant process. We'll talk about how to register on the GATA grantee portal, or how to update your portal registration. We'll talk about pre-qualification. We'll talk a little bit about notice of funding opportunity and where to find it. Matt just went over this specific NOFO, as we call them. We'll also talk about what to expect after a grant award, and we'll also go more into detail about that next week as well. So next slide. All right, so this is a kind of big picture overview of what to expect when you are applying for a competitive grant with the state of Illinois. So first, you're focusing on those pre-award requirements, which we're going to be going through those today, getting pre-qualified, making sure that you are good to go in the GATA grantee portal. All of these pre-qualification rules, like making sure you have a current sam.gov account, and I'll go more into these with other slides. After that, after you're ready, you're pre-qualified, make sure you're eligible for the particular grant that you're applying for. Then you submit your application. Your application goes through a review process with a merit review committee. You will receive notice if you are chosen for the award that you applied for. After that, we will work with you. You will have a grant manager at the Department of Commerce, and they will work with you on getting a grant agreement executed. So the grant agreement is really going to go into detail what is expected of you as the grantee, what is expected from DCEO, really laying out what the requirements are. After that, you have an active grant. You'll be working with your program staff and making sure that objectives are met, that sort of thing. Your grant funds are generally given in a reimbursement situation. But it also just depends on the grant, and that will be completely laid out for you in the notice of funding opportunity. You will also be required it'll be laid out in the NOFO, and it will be laid out in the grant agreement. You will be required to give periodic reporting. So this will be reporting on our objectives being met. It'll also be reporting on financial, what you have spent the money on. And once you're done with the grant activities, you will be required to conduct an audit of your of the money that you have spent, your expenditures from the state. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so we keep using this term GATA. What is GATA? It's the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. So this came from the grantee community, wanted to remove redundancies and streamline the grant process. So for a while, we had different agencies requiring different things to be pre-qualified. And so it was causing a lot of confusion for grantees that maybe had grants in multiple departments, that sort of thing. So the goal was to remove duplications, increase accountability and transparency. So we now follow the federal guidelines, which are known as 2 CFR 200. And you can find these online. You can just Google 2 CFR 200. These are created at a federal level, but at the state of Illinois, we are using these kind of rules and requirements as well. Next slide. All right. So GATA is our kind of rules for all things grants. We also call our grantee portal, so our website where we are getting, where you are giving us information, we're giving you information. We call this the GATA grantee portal. And that is at grants.illinois.gov/portal. And it is in the chat as well. So if you are brand new to the GATA grantee portal, you will want to create an account. And this image on the screen is the first image that you will see when you enter the grantee portal, and just follow the steps to create the account. Next slide. One item that I definitely recommend if you are brand new to the GATA grantee portal, or if you haven't used it in a while, is checking out this GATA new user guide. I even use it sometimes and reference it in my own work, and I'm in the GATA portal every day. So this document really goes step by step on how to get started with the GATA grantee portal, how to kind of maintain your active registrations, what to expect periodically from the portal. So definitely check that out. I would also recommend checking out gata.illinois.gov. So this is created by the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. This is where we have kind of our centralized state. Our GATA staff are in Gombe, and they have a load of really helpful resources and guides for you. If you are brand new to the grant process, or if you are kind of troubleshooting something going on, check out that website. And then I'll also be sharing our DCEO website a little later. Next slide. All right, so into pre-qualification. What does that even mean? It is the state of Illinois' it's a set of requirements for all organizations seeking to receive grant funding. So you might hear this as being in good standing. In the GATA grantee portal, it will be labeled as pre-qualification. So this screen here It won't be in green, mine is in green, but this shows you all of the pre-qualification requirements and if you are in good standing with those. So it's our way of helping folks maintain compliance, responsibly manage their funds. It's kind of our go-to. You need to be in good standing. You need to be pre-qualified to be able to apply for a grant. All right, so this is an example of a grantee. So this would be, they would be in the GATA grantee portal in their account, and they would scroll down and see pre-qualification status, and it will go through line by line what you're in good status with, what you need to work on. The items in red are the ones that the grantee needs to address and needs to be in good standing with. So you can see with this one, the SAM.gov account, they're not in good standing with that. They need to get that resolved. They also have the Illinois Secretary of State not found, so they need to get that information in there. The one in yellow says pending. That means that it's being evaluated by the state, and it should update within the next day or two. Sometimes this website needs an overnight cycle to get more in sync. So don't worry about the yellow ones. The red ones are the ones that you as a potential grantee need to focus on. All right, next one. All right, so I'm just going to go through line by line what these pre-qualification requirements are and what you need to do as a grantee to make sure you're in good standing. So a SAM.gov account, you will need to make sure that you are registered in the federal SAM.gov account and that you have a UEI number. So the UEI stands for Unique Entity Identifier. This is a number used by SAM.gov, and you will need this identifier when you are registering for the state GATA grantee portal. So first up comes going to SAM.gov, getting your UEI number, and then you can register at the state GATA grantee portal. Okay. Let's see. Okay, registrations should be set to public. When you are registering on SAM.gov, you have the option to set your account to public or private. We highly, highly, highly recommend that it is set to public because it will make things so much easier for the federal site to sync with the state site, the GATA grantee portal. So the active registration on SAM.gov is validated annually. If you set your registration to public, the two systems work together and it will do it on its own. So you don't need to worry about that. We ask potential grantees to make sure that they are completely registering at SAM.gov. What we see a lot in Office of Accountability is folks will get that UEI number and then not complete the rest of the registration. So you need to make sure that you complete all the steps and you are in active registration with that website. That is part of the pre-qualification. And sometimes that does take about a week or so if it's a brand new registration for SAM.gov to get you going. So this is why we mentioned it in the beginning to make sure that you get your SAM.gov account ready to go for application time. Next slide. All right, next up is FEEN. So that is the Federal Employer ID number. You likely already have this ready to go. This is through the IRS. it's used by the federal government, we will also have that number in the GATA grantee portal. So you will be entering that in the portal, making sure that you're in good status with that. That is your status with your FEE number is confirmed automatically from sam.gov. So like I said, when your registration is set to public, the two systems will talk to each other, and we will get the most update information on the state site. So if you are in what we call a FEE lock, that means that a grantee cannot execute or modify a grant agreement until the issue is resolved. So just making sure that you are good to go with your FEE number and with the IRS is really important when you are thinking about applying for a grant. Okay, next up, we've got the federal excluded parties list. So as you can imagine, if you are on this list, then you will not be in good standing. You will not be pre-qualified for a grant. So if you are excluded from receiving federal contracts, you will not be eligible to apply for a state grant. This is another one that you don't need to do anything with it in the GATA grantee portal, because sam.gov is going to talk to the state site and update that automatically. Next up, the Illinois Secretary of State. So you do need to be in good standing with them as well. Let's see. So to do business with the state of Illinois, an entity must be registered with the Illinois Secretary of State and obtain a certificate of good standing. The certificate demonstrates that the entity exists and is in full compliance with state regulations. So you will be, if you do need to register with the Secretary of State, you do that at www.ilsos.gov. Let's see. The Secretary of State website has a special section of business resources that can assist organizations that need to obtain their certificate of good standing. So check out their website if you do have additional questions about that requirement. Okay, next up, the Illinois Stop Payment List. You cannot be on the Illinois Stop Payment List at the time of applying for a grant. If you go into the GATA grantee portal and it says that you are on the list and it's highlighted in red, it's usually something that can be reversed. Usually it's you missed the submission of a missing item or a report from a previous grant. It's usually something that can be remedied. So we recommend that you contact your former grant manager at either DCEO or if it was at another department. But you can also contact us and we will try our best to get that information to you. So I've got our email address in the Office of Accountability, ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. You can contact us on the GATA grantee portal. It doesn't give a whole lot of information about why you were put on the list and what you need to do to make that happen. But on our end, we can find out what exactly it was, what grant, what report, what audit, that sort of thing. So make sure that you check out your portal registration and make sure you're not on that list, because if you are, it might take a little bit to get you off of the list. Okay, and lastly, the Illinois DHFS sanction list. This is if you're in violation of administrative rules, civil laws, criminal offense, and you are not eligible for Medicaid reimbursement, that would put you on this list. And if you see that you are on the list, you will need to contact DHFS because you are not eligible for a state grant if you were put on this list. Okay, so that is the pre-qualification items that you will see in the GATA grantee portal, and that you need to be in good standing with all of those. A couple of other tips when you're in the portal. We often see folks, they have a contact list in the portal that is not up to date. We recommend checking your contact list and who has access with your organization, who has access to get into your portal. So make sure that is up to date. And this image here, it has a little arrow that says manage portal access. Make sure that you check that out and make sure that it's all current staff or current board members. And we also recommend having more than one person with portal access. That's just in case something happens or someone leaves or someone else needs to get into it, have at least 2 people. Also make sure that your fiscal year end date is accurate in the portal. What the end date that we have in there will determine when audits are due. So just make sure that you have that up to date. Next slide. Okay, and Matt went over this particular NOFO. As far as the layout of notice of funding opportunities, they're all pretty much the same. They'll go over the important details of a program and how to apply. So it'll go over the program description, the funding information, who is eligible for this particular grant, how to apply, what happens when you apply, award administration information. It'll also it'll go through any other information that is applicable to that particular grant. So this is the go-to place for all things grant application. This will give you the most up-to-date and official language. So that NOFO is definitely something that you're going to want to check out for this grant. If you are interested in looking at other notice of funding opportunities, that can be found in the CSFA, or the Catalog of State Financial Assistance. When you go into the GATA grantee portal, you can click on CSFA at the ribbon at the top, and that will put up a search, and you can search for all the grants available with the state, and you can search in particular for DCEO, or if there's another department, that's where you find those other opportunities. Okay, so another aspect, another requirement in the GATA grantee portal that will need to be completed. It is not required. I believe it's required when you do the application. It is required by all state agencies, so you will want to get this one completed. It is a questionnaire. We call it the ICQ, and it is completed annually in the GATA grantee portal. So you will scroll down and you will see on this image to the left, it says Fiscal Administrative Internal Controls Questionnaire, ICQ. And you will need to complete this every fiscal year. So you need to do 2024. Once you click on it, you will see on the right all of the sections that you need to fill out for the ICQ. This mitigates risk. Is your entity ready for a grant? Do you have the financial systems in place? That sort of thing. That's kind of what this questionnaire will go through, and it will determine kind of what the risk is to give grant funding to your entity. It helps build grantee capacity, because if there is something that needs to be addressed, it can be addressed ahead of time to make things easier for the reporting and for the audit, that sort of thing. So just know that this is not punitive. It's not something that you will get in trouble if a certain question is answered a certain way. It might help us kind of with if there's extra kind of procedures needed to make sure that a grantee is in place for this kind of bigger financial situation, but it is not something that is punitive at all. And the 5 categories are quality of management system, financial and programmatic reporting, ability to effectively implement requirements, and audits. So it's 4 categories, not 5. Okay, next slide. All right, so you were pre-qualified, you applied for the grant using the NOFO, you received notice that you were awarded the grant, you were executed a grant agreement. At that point, when you're in an active grant, you're going to be working with an assigned grant manager here at DCEO to make sure that you are reporting on what you're doing with the money. And kind of the 2 sections that we focus on are periodic financial reports and periodic performance reports. So these are going to go through your grant manager, and you will receive more information on that once you are given your award. It's also something to keep in mind that you will be required to conduct an audit. More information will be given to you once your grant agreement is in place, but this is done through the GATA grantee portal. So you will see a section that says audits and kind of what is required, what you need to work on, and you'll make sure that everything is in place for that. And all of this is laid out for you in your executed grant agreement. And then I'll just touch on next slide. This table that we have here goes through all of the audit types and the submission deadlines. I think that this table can be a little daunting, but I just keep in mind that when you first start your audit in the GATA grantee portal, the first step is a questionnaire kind of going through how much money did you receive? Are you a nonprofit or a for-profit? You kind of take this survey, and it will tell you what sort of audit is needed for that particular fiscal year. So don't worry too much about these different type of audits, because the good thing is the GATA portal will let us know what audit you need to work on. Okay, so that is it for me. Just go over some of the resources. I highly recommend you look at our DCEO grant opportunities website. We recently updated it with lots of information and resources for new potential grantees, current grantees. We have several video tutorials going over subjects like pre-qualification, audits, procurement, all sorts of stuff. We also have an FAQ that will go over some common questions. We have a resource library with all sorts of manuals and the different components of grants here at DCEO. So be sure to check that out. And if you have any questions about grants in general or the GATA grantee portal, audits, any sort of thing, you're welcome to contact us at the Office of Accountability. So that's ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. There's a couple of us that man this email, and we generally get back to you pretty quickly. If we don't know the answer, we will find you the answer and make sure that you are ready to go for your grant applications. So Matt, I think if we have any questions or anything, we can get into that, but I'm all done with mine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amber. That was tremendous and in way more depth than I'm able to provide. And so just want to again congratulate you for for making sense of all of this, and thank you for that. Nancy, if there are any questions that you've received, I think this would be a great time for us to maybe get into some more depth on this. Otherwise, just a reminder, we have a similar session planned for next Thursday where we'll be talking about procurement, the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, and some follow-up aspects of what was presented today. So Nancy, anything in front of you in terms of questions?
So far, I think people have been really just trying to absorb everything. It's a lot of really great information, amazing set of resources that were covered in the presentation, as well as in the chat. Those links will be very helpful. And so, yes, actually, okay, some questions are now coming in. When do you complete the pre-application? Do you do this at the same time that you're submitting the grant application?
So I think you're referring to the pre-qualification. So that is the set of requirements that are needed in the GATA grantee portal before you can apply for a grant. So for sure, the pre-qualification steps are needed before you submit a grant application. So the items such as being registered on sam.gov, making sure you're not on the stop payment list, those items you need to be in good standing before you can submit a grant application. So that's kind of why we go through this first, to make sure we kind of have all of our ducks in a row before we get into the bigger grant application.
That's great. Thank you so much for clarifying that for everybody. Thank you as well for the question about the slides, and I will be sending out an email at the end of this with the link to the recording, and so I will include the slides from today on that email. So yes, this recording and the slides will be accessible to all who have registered for the series. And if you have not registered, please feel free to drop your email in a direct message to me or in the chat as well, just and I'll be able to include you. So a lot of great information today. We certainly, if there are no additional questions, there's no harm in finishing early, but I do want to give both of our speakers a chance to maybe highlight any takeaways, maybe some things that you think are very common questions that you get that you maybe want to mention one more time as a reminder, or anything you feel folks can take away today. That'll also just give a moment to the participants to get any last minute questions in the chat.
Amber, anything jump out for you?
I think a big takeaway from this is go to that GATA grantee portal site, see if your entity is registered already. If not, get it going, because it does take a little bit of time to make sure all those pre-qualification parts are in place.
Yeah, and riffing off of that, I know every time we have a deadline for grant applications, there are a couple that come in ahead of the deadline, but we're able to flag that they're not GATA pre-qualified. And so that's, I understand as a former applicant for grants of all kinds in the past, those deadlines are important, but you got to make sure you got your steps in place if you're going to qualify for funding. And so, yeah, really good point, Amber. And I think another point is just, and we're going to get into this next week too, is, certain grant programs will allow for costs that are incurred prior to a grant award to be recouped. And so you're going to want to be on the right side of procurement requirements from the get-go. If you have any consultative support or work that you want to have covered before the grant is actually agreements executed and issued, you got to make sure that you got your ducks in a row right away. So understanding those procurement requirements is really important. We'll be getting into more in depth during our next webinar on the 20th, but nonetheless, really important pieces here we want to emphasize.
All right, well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just wanted to bring folks back to the two tracks that we've got for the summer webinar series. If you missed this on the front end, or if you just want to review again, there's two tracks we're running, one on grant guidance, how to become a qualified applicant and get a grant and be in good standing once you get that grant. And then track B, really empowering the community voice and stakeholders to take part in our specific programming and make a difference on broadband adoption, access, and utilization. And so here's the schedule. Again, this is the 13th, the first of 8 in a series. Next week, we'll be getting in depth on procurement and the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, again, following up on some of the questions here today. And so if you happen to catch this webinar after the fact, if you've got any questions, feel free to send us an email, and we'll make sure that we address your question during the next webinar. And certainly, we're happy to have a conversation offline as well.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll just add, tell your friends, because as we are putting out the announcements for the subsequent webinars in the series and emailing the follow-ups to these sessions, we, continue to have the links to the recordings, stack up. So let friends know they can join in at any time. Let your colleagues across the state know. And so we'll just keep rolling out the registrations so that folks can get in to the whole series, whether it's recording or live. And so thank you again for putting the grants link and those other links into the chat. Thank you all for being here. I won't hold us up. I don't see any other questions. An amazing amount of information, really good clarity. Really appreciate both of your time today. We're grateful and hope everyone has a great rest of their weekend.
Thank you all.